Hey, YouTube viewers. It's kind of summer here, so I've taken off my shirt. Hope you don't mind. I wanted to talk about sort of the thing with libertarians and progressives and how there's this stupid thing where they fight all the time. You call into a libertarian show and you talk about some progressive policies, and they'll be like, no, you're just an evil statist. And then you talk to someone like Sam Cedar or, for example, Tom Hartman, both very intelligent guys, and there's this sort of complete sort of tendency to just caricature libertarians. They use these words libertarians. There's so many types of libertarians out there, so I wanted to make this video about libertarian thought, what is central to libertarian thought, and then what is sort of secondary and how this big tent splits up. Because when you talk about libertarians being silly or stupid or whatever, you got to realize there are so many different types of libertarians, from social libertarian, socialists, to anarcho-capitalists, and everything in between. So when you paint everybody with a big brush and a broad brush, you could do that with your party as well, whether you're Republican or Democrat, okay? And so many straw men, I just can't believe it. Like when, for some reason, Tom Hartman thinks that the libertarianism started in 1980, and he keeps going back to the Koch brothers and how one of the brothers ran as a vice president, and he reads off the list of the Libertarian Party's platform, not realizing that the libertarian thought really traces its roots back to classical liberalism, which was at that time just called liberalism. So people like Lysander Spooner in the U.S. lived a couple hundred years ago, and they talked about the dangers of collectivism and the Constitution, and they talked about individual property and individual liberty, okay? Individual liberty and property. You had Frederick Bastiat in France, okay? He talked about against statism and against how the state constantly wants to control everything, including, put tariffs. You had, for example, talk about free trade, where you had Adam Smith, okay? Adam Smith wrote his treatise on the Wealth of Nations talking about how protectionism may be against the interests of the country. I mean, you had protectionists debating guys like Milton Friedman, who was born before the Koch brothers were even born. He was fighting for libertarian principles. He called himself a libertarian. There are other libertarians like Ayn Rand, who looked down on libertarians but had a lot of things in common with them, with her philosophy of objectivism, where she believed that the individual not only owned property, but also intellectual property, which she valued very highly. And she kind of reacted to communism with this idolization of the Übermensch, in a way, this creative producer that she had in her books, like Atlas Shrugged. You had John Stuart Mill in England, okay, a little over 100 years ago, writing about libertarianism and about how the government, what is the proper role of government in society. These ideas predate the Koch brothers, okay? And they predate a lot of the anarcho-capitalist strains of thought that are around today. Guys like Murray Rothbard may be, and Walter Block may be sort of the academic, recent, quote-unquote, recent side of the anarcho-capitalist thought. But I wish there were more libertarians that actually focused on the outcomes. People like Hayek, Friedman, Ludwig von Mises, okay? They were in the past, but there aren't a lot of sort of utilitarian, outcome-based libertarians today, which I find sad, because when you listen to a guy like Milton Friedman, he doesn't argue for libertarian policies or the government to step away and let the market work. He doesn't argue for these things on the basis of the NAP, the non-aggression principle. He recognizes that there are, who starts the aggression may be, for example, a matter of belief. If you copied my song and I don't believe in intellectual property, am I now entitled to, defend my property? If you wandered into my rainforest, and can I really own that much? Well, can I now, capture you and treat you as a sex slave for 20 years? I mean, the NAP may be a little vague, but that's not where a lot of libertarians came from originally, okay? A lot of libertarian thought comes from classical liberalism. And classical liberalism sort of is called classical because the liberals and the progressives, they kind of split, okay, in the 20th century. And the progressives started going more towards larger government and group rights. And classical liberals remained with individual property and liberty, okay? So whenever you see someone talk about, for example, the color shouldn't matter, the content of the character should matter, that is a classical liberal position, right? You don't look at the color of the person. There's this great movie, Guess Who's Coming to Dinner, which is all about that. The guy is called a real fighting liberal, the father. That's a liberal, okay? That's a person who says, look, it's the person's character that matters. It's the person's rights that matter. And I could go down the list. I have a list here of things that liberals and progressives, I should say libertarians now, and progressives have in common. And I would like to see a lot more working together, okay? Because these things are all opposed to large government. They're all opposed to tyranny and basically opposed to statism, okay? So when John Stuart Mill, or for example, when Lysander Spooner argued against collectivism, those are the same kinds of things that led to Mao Zedong, okay? And the Great Revolution in China, which had some good things, okay, but also had a lot of faults and errors in how they handled the economy, so that a lot of people died. 30 million people in China over a short span of maybe 3 or 4 years died from a famine because the farms were collectivized and they just had to make it work the communist way, right? The government was heavily involved in that. And the same thing in the USSR. When the USSR was forming in Stalin's era, when Stalin came to power, they started to really collectivize the farms. They went from kolkhoz, which is коллективное хозяйство in Russian, to sovkhoz, совместное хозяйство, which is more collectivized farms. And in the Ukraine, where a lot of the farms were situated, there was a similar famine that you saw later in China. So it's not that there was necessarily a desire to go ahead and commit genocide against Ukrainians or something like that. It's the ideas, it's the collectivism, and it's the ideology. So whenever you have a government and you have an ideology together, then you have basically a group that's willing to sacrifice people's lives just to make sure their ideology works out. And that's been one of the most destructive forces in the world, especially whether it's Nazis, whether it's communism, trying to, let's say the ЧК, okay? These were чрезвычайная комиссия. These were in Russian. The group that would literally do Chinese water torture and made rats go up people's asses while they were tied up and chew through the people and so forth. They would literally torture the people that had any sort of money or possessions above some amount. And basically they tried to affect the communist revolution. Now, I understand people felt strongly about their ideals and they wanted to help people. But to use government to do this, I think everybody realizes can lead to bad things. And there are limits, and I think even today's progressives realize that. How would you want to have the whole healthcare system run by the government? Not single payer, but literally where the medical school, the hospitals, everything were just run by the government, right? There would be no competition with the government. So if there was no competition, then it wouldn't face any market discipline or market competition that would force it to sort of innovate and make the prices go down and invest into things that might bring down cost. Now, governments do that, and there should be ways to improve that sort of government function. Like the DMV should put a lot of forms online, for example, right? Or you should have cops have body cameras on duty. You just switch on when they're on duty, and it's not under the cops' control that they're on. And then you should have government laws to subpoena those things so it could be well-defined when they get produced in a court case, and so people can get the actual information of what's going on, right? These things can be done. You don't need the free market for this. You just need democracy. But other things, when you have public schools that are failing, and there's no other school that people are allowed to send their kids to, because all the funding is going to the public school that's failing, and it even attracts more public funding, and it still fails, that does not do a service to the people. It would be much better if the private market was able to set up competing schools. If they're not better, so no one loses really, they just still go to this school. But if they are better, then the government should actually provide the voucher for the consumer to choose where to go. If you can choose your doctor, if you can choose your sex partner, why shouldn't you be able to choose the school that your kids go to or anything else, the daycare center, right? So while it is a sort of an idea that many liberals and progressives, and by the way, conservatives can agree on, which is that a safety net where consumers choose how to spend the money. It could be unconditional basic income, where you tax have a progressive tax system like progressives want. And you can sell it this way to progressives and say, listen, we want an expanded welfare system. Stop relying on minimum wage. Why do people have to work to live? They just need a safety net, right? And then why do the rich have to pay their fair share? So have a progressive tax system. You can have that. Or you can have what Milton Friedman advocated, which is the negative tax, which mathematically in the limit comes down to the same thing, which is essentially if you make below a certain amount, the government gives you money, but everyone has to file a tax return. So that's really the difference with the negative tax, is everyone has to file a tax return all the time. And then they get the basic income, which diminishes the more they make. And with the progressive policies, the progressive tax is the thing that claws back the money. But either way, it's the same policies. They're advocating basically for the same things, and yet they're enemies. And this is, at least, they're not enemies. But as usual, the political sort of the talking heads, the radio stations, the radio hosts, in order to always be right, and you have a brand, right? You have to basically, I guess, keep up this appearance that you can't have your mind be changed all the time. Because if your mind is changed all the time, who's going to watch you? You're going to be like people talk about Donald Trump being a Democrat and being, let's say, for abortion and then becoming anti-abortion. You kind of become this flip-flopper, right? So you're very on guard against that. And so and plus you have a radio show, so you can always cut off the mic. You can always, you have 2 minutes and then the music comes in, and I get it. I get this is not your main business. But as a result, the people that follow you, they engage in all these debates, and they're kind of brainwashed into thinking they're so different from each other. The same thing happens with conservative media versus liberal media, but this video is not about that. So here are 10 things that classical liberals and progressives agree on, okay? You guys should be talking with one another on how to achieve these things, because the time and energy you spend bickering and fighting each other could be flipped, and you could work together to actually get these things done. Kind of like when Ron Paul, a 30-year consistent congressman who always stood up for his libertarian beliefs, teamed up with Bernie Sanders, a 30-year advocate and also consistent Senate member, to basically audit the Fed. Ron Paul couldn't do it by himself, okay? Bernie Sanders, the king of the amendment, came in, right, and he worked with him because they both wanted that to happen. And together they audited the Fed. Now, can we do that to audit the Pentagon for trillions of dollars? Or do we have to always pay out of our pocket for more war, more bases? 30, what is it now? America has 30 times the rest of the world combined in terms of number of bases, right? And just as an aside, if you're a conservative and you're against big government and top-down central planning and socialism, what do you think it is that we have so many bases around the world with McDonald's, with all the food, with all this stuff, and then you come and tell the taxpayer, listen, our soldiers, they don't have enough food. Look, they're naked. I'm not naked. I'm just saying, I could be naked, but I'm not. So the soldiers, they don't have the equipment, and at the same time, the Pentagon can't even account for trillions of dollars. And why? There's no competition. It's the agency that's going to do it, whether it's able to account for trillions of dollars or not. Democracy is just one mechanism, and maybe you can replace some of your politicians, and maybe they can replace some of the bureaucrats that are unelected, and those bureaucrats will eventually do the right thing, quote unquote, right? But how many years, decades will happen until then? It would be nice if at least people that want to audit the Pentagon or audit the Fed or put body cameras in cops or any of the other things, or end the drug war, as I'm going to talk about, could team up and actually get it done. And if you're a radio host and you're listening to this, at least at least open your mind enough to realize you're having an influence on all these people, okay? I'm reaching probably like my 3 friends right now. But you could actually call a ceasefire in the war. If you are if you're a libertarian radio host, you might acknowledge that you have these things in common with progressives and then actually work with them. Call on your listeners to work with them on it. Call on your listeners to actually engage with the people in their community who might be liberals or libertarians to work together. Okay, that's what this video is about. So here's the list. Opposing the war on drugs. Okay, guess what? Smoking a joint is probably healthier for you than smoking a cigarette. Okay, might be less healthy than the vaping. I don't know. But either way, you're not hurting anybody. You are literally not hurting a single other person. Now, if you drink and drive, yes, you're putting other people in danger. Possibly, if you smoke a joint and drive, you're putting people in danger. But if you just smoke it in your house, libertarians would say, obviously you're not hurting anybody. And the libertarians that believe in the non-aggression principle would clearly come down on the side of ending the drug war. What about progressives? Yeah, progressives realize just how much the drug war is hurting people as well. People who are in jail, for example, for drug possession. Literally drug possession for their own selves, so they just want to smoke, okay? Secondly, people in Mexico are fleeing Mexico. You know, conservatives say, look at all these illegal immigrants coming in, they're harming our country. Well, our government harmed their country, or them, because before ISIS, they literally had gangs running their cities and beheading people and putting it on, TV, or making videos about it in order to make sure nobody else gets to them. And the more the drug war escalates, the more the drug dealers have to become ruthless. And you can see this now in the Philippines, okay? Or you could see this now when a person runs for president, okay, on a platform that I'm going to kill at least 100,000 drug dealers, and people go, yep, that sounds about right. We're going to elect you president. You can tell that the drug war is going to have a big effect, okay? So that's a drug war. Both parties are on the same side, okay? So you can end the drug war. At least legalize marijuana and regulate the other drugs. Okay, gay people should have the same rights as everybody else. And interracial marriages should be there. Guess what? Marriage licenses happened because of interracial marriage to begin with. States wanted to make sure that these marriages wouldn't be happening. So they would issue licenses to people so they could get married. And this is a government function, right? Again, if you're not hurting anybody with your sexual activities, who are you really hurting if you're in your bedroom and doing this, right? If you're going at it and you do what you want to do, and many people forget, having sex with a same-sex partner or a different sex partner, they do a lot of crazy things, and it's consensual. As long as both people want to do it, or maybe there are more than 2 people, again, the libertarian position, let the government stay out of your bedroom. The progressive position is the same thing. I mean, progressives have just wanted to legalize gay marriage. But again, why would the government even need to be in gay marriage or in marriage, in the business of marriage? Why would it need to issue licenses when, if you look at the history, licenses were issued to prevent people from consensual arrangements, whatever they want to do? I mean, marriage is probably more of a religious institution originally, and it might have been co-opted by secular organizations. That's fine. But the government, with the threat of force, what can it do? So again, I think both sides are in the same camp, that no matter your sexual preference or your sexual identity, you have the same rights as everyone else, okay? Number 3, police brutality and institutional racism. You hear this a lot right now from the left. You hear this a lot from Black Lives Matter. They want to highlight this. Institutional racism, they say, has been embedded in our culture from the beginning, right? Embedded in what? Government, right? Top down, okay? Because if you look at Jim Crow laws, if you look at segregation laws, right? And then you get these radio hosts saying, oh, do you support the Civil Rights Act? Like, yes, of course, the Civil Rights Act, also, you credit government for that. But then government was the institution that perpetuated, why did Rosa Parks have to sit and have to rebel? Why she have to sit in the back of the bus in the first place? I'll give you a hint. It wasn't the bus company that necessarily needed to do this, okay? It was people getting together democratically, democracy, and passing laws for this to happen. The institution of government was used to perpetuate slavery. The institution of government was used to perpetuate segregation and Jim Crow laws, okay? The KKK was literally made up of disgruntled Southerners who used to enjoy power in the government, okay? Until the North started making laws, basically making it so that black people could get elected to office, okay? And then they said, what is this? So they literally became violent, and they fought against this as much as they could, the KKK. But again, what was the Confederate Army? There was a government, right? This is a government thing. Now, of course, government represents people, but the democratic system of this idea that just through democracy you can oppress the rights of others, right, is a dangerous weapon. It can lead to things, like I said, like the rise of communism. Or you can look at Saudi Arabia, okay? Or you can look at Islamic regimes where the majority of the population is Muslim. So the government represents possibly the 90% of the views that they all share, and they kind of enforce that. But the result is Saudi Arabia, where's the religious freedom, okay? Or in the Palestinian territories, for example, where you have Palestinians living, a lot of them are Muslim now. In Bethlehem, it used to be in the 50s, 85% Christian. Now it's 12%, right? So there's some kind of Islamicization going on, and it's kind of a self-reinforcing thing. The more people are Islamic, the more the government is, the more laws they pass. Look at Gaza with Hamas, for example. I'm picking specifically Islamic areas to show that, yes, the government does represent a lot of the people, but then you can't use that to go ahead and oppress everybody else, okay? And if you have, let's say, honor killings or rapes against women, you can't have the government protect these guys and get out after 2 years or whatever, or just let them off the hook, okay? Just like when you have lynchings of black people in the South, you can't have the government just be like, oh, well, I guess they were black, so it doesn't matter. You can't have the government turn a blind eye to these things. Government needs to protect individual rights. And I think both parties, both libertarians that are not anarchists, agree if the government should do anything, the first thing it should do is protect people's rights, okay? Whereas on the other hand, you can have statism go to like communist USSR, where you literally would call people, label them the enemy of the people, and ship them off to be killed or worked to death or whatever. Now, some of the stories may have been exaggerated, like the Gulag Archipelago, etc., but many of the stories were not, okay? Literally, Stalin called his regime the Great Terror, Большой террор, okay? Like, some of the policies were literally called that to strike fear into the population so that they would get with the program. These are the things, normally, that we should be worried about. And I think classical liberals are further from these things than progressives, because progressives have these ideologies they need to push. They need to push these ideologies because it gives them political relevance. There has to be a bad guy. And the class struggle, whether it's police versus black people in their communities, or whether it's the 1% versus the 99. There has to be some sort of like boogeyman, and the boogeyman has to lose for everybody to win, okay? But that's usually not how things work. With body cameras, right, both police win and the people they're policing win. There are some cases where the police get into a bad situation and literally their lives are in danger. There are other cases where the police are just being assholes, and there are yet other cases where police are literally just beating the shit out of a person for no reason at all, right? There are different cases, and we need to improve the policies and technologies for everyone, for everyone. We're all in it together. This is the United States of America. Plus, if you're watching internationally, and if you know Russian, Cool. But my point is, this is the United States of America. We're all here. It's like Barack Obama said. This is one thing we can all agree on, I think. We're all in this melting pot together. So, are we going to cause divisions between liberals and libertarians, between left and the right and whatever, or we're going to find common agreement? Let's go find common agreement. Okay, both parties are anti-war, both sets of thinking, okay? If you're progressive, you think, why did we go into Iraq? Did we have a good reason? Why did Bush lie to us, right? There's certain aspect to, Bush is on the other side. He's a Republican, so he lied to us, right? Whereas like Obama did, the secret raids, let's say running guns to Mexico, well, that was just a mistake, right? Or, arming rebels in Syria. Well, what could you do? I mean, that guy is a bad dictator being propped up, But when Bush does it, okay, so let's look at Bush. Progressives, and I think most people in the world look at this and are like, yeah, we should not have gone into Iraq. I mean, our current president, Donald Trump, says this, right? And it's a pretty popular position. But obviously, libertarians would have said that a long time ago. Ron Paul, obviously voted against it, right? Why? Because, again, going around the world, spending all this money, results in blowback. Blowback is when people are really pissed off and they find ways to harm us, the civilians, okay? If our government goes and harms civilians every day, every other day there's someone being killed with drone strikes that you don't know about, right? What are people there going to think? And some of them could actually come into America or radicalize someone in the United States, right? I mean, it can jump over the internet through YouTube, right? So this is blowback. It makes us less safe in some instances, okay? And frankly, diplomacy might work better than the army. Like with North Korea, perhaps if we put more money at that time in '94, there was a framework where North Korea was willing to not get a nuke in exchange for a lot of things that Republicans called appeasement. And so the whole thing was sort of dropped. This was with the dad of Kim Jong-un. And so Kim Jong-il was actually willing to work with the United States. But, from their point of view, they're distrustful of the United States. And they certainly are not any angels themselves. The United States, from its point of view, looks at this and are like, why should we spend all this money on diplomacy? And why should we do all these deals? They should just give up their nukes and we're going to sanction them to death. Well, how well did that work? Right now, we might have to pay more. We have to pay more in influence, in the money. If a war ever breaks out, which I hope it doesn't, millions of people would die. So again, diplomacy over war. I think both parties would agree to that. Freedom of the press, do I even have to? I mean, okay, liberals, they are always in favor of freedom of the press, both the classical liberals and the progressives, okay? As much as they can bitch and moan about InfoWars or Fox News, right? Jon Stewart can lampoon Fox News. He would never say, cut their license, take them off the air, right? The same way. So even how you react when an authoritarian leader comes in and says, let's chill free speech, I think both parties realize they're on the same side of that issue. They're both against the government spying. Actually, that's more true of the libertarians. Liberals, when it comes to progressive liberals, they sort of are, because of the Democratic Party, because they're part of the mainstream establishment, they are much more sort of tolerant, like, well, we need the NSA to keep us safe. And, right now, especially with the Russia thing, it's like, well, Russia hacked the election. Just as an aside, why did they say that trolls and the word hack, why is the word hack there? It's because they initially thought that Russia hacked the DNC server. And then they realized, no, it was a leak. And somebody leaked it to the WikiLeaks. We're not sure who it is. But, Podesta, his email was phished. Phishing is when they get your password. And they only got it because the guy that he forwarded the email to got confused or wrote back something that confused Podesta, and then he gave up his password, basically, to this phishing site. Okay, that could be anybody. I'm sure the intelligence agency have more stuff on it, but they're not revealing it to anybody. So that aspect of it sort of is an ongoing pissing contest, basically, between people on the left who are really upset that Hillary lost, and they're kind of tying this outrage to Russia. Now, should there be an investigation? Yes, but there should be public information. What happened? What is the evidence? Because WMDs, we've had that before. We don't just want to trust that our government has this information they're never going to reveal, but we should just trust them and therefore escalate with like another nuclear power or wind up killing a lot of people in Syria or something because we won't cooperate with one another. So there's the Russia thing. But yeah, did Donald Trump Jr. Meet with the Russians? Yeah, probably there was that. But the hacking, the word hack comes from people who just don't want to admit, yeah, we were wrong. The server wasn't hacked any more than they usually are by Russians or Chinese or Americans hacking Angela Merkel's phone or something. But anyway, my point is against government spying, where Edward Snowden, again, sought asylum when essentially Russia kind of kicked America in the face when it gave asylum to Edward Snowden. But what did he do? He revealed to the American public, us, that we're being spied on, not because we're suspected of having committed a crime, but just as wholesale ingestion of all our information. And yeah, the NSA is pretty ingenious, and you guys are really cool at indexing everything. And you're at the forefront of cryptography, and you probably have backdoors in a lot of algorithms, and maybe the computer I'm using right now from Apple has a lot of backdoors. Who knows? I'm sure Apple does not want that. But then again, some companies may want that. And so props to being a great spy agency, but the mandate is to spy on other countries. So again, I think progressives should kind of join the libertarians on this and say, look, there should be more transparency. The government should tell us what they know. If someone was hacked and we're going to undermine the presidency of the United States, we should do it either for legitimate reasons. There's tons of reasons you could criticize the president, but this thing, show me the evidence. Show me the actual evidence of hacking. Like you're showing the evidence of, the evidence comes out of Donald Jr. meeting with people. Okay, that would be nice. A government that's actually more transparent, which Obama promised would be the most transparent administration in history. Data.gov, that was a good attempt. That was a good start. But there's a lot more that can be done. And frankly, the expansion of the surveillance state, the militarization of police, and how the military-industrial complex sells all this stuff, big business, to Iraq and to people in Iraq. And then, whoops, by the way, we forgot the Humvees. They don't really have a lock, so like ISIS just took them. And all the tanks, yeah, we just kind of left them there, and ISIS is on top of the tanks making a video like, oh, we just found these. Yeah, billions of dollars. The Pentagon can't account for trillions over the years, and you can't put a freaking lock, like a biometric lock, or some kind of codes that you receive every day to make the tank not run in the wrong hands, like literally. And then Americans and others have to give up their lives for this bullshit, right? And fine, whatever. I mean, it's not whatever. This is the danger of militarism. But then the militarism comes home, and our nice police departments have even better ways to put down the rebellion against whatever. And we're not talking about water hoses. We're literally talking about possibly a ray that will, heat up your skin and cause severe burns. But hey, it's military-grade technology, and someone's got to use it secondhand. So we might as well sell it to our own domestic police departments. And that's how the cows come home to roost, along with the chickens, who don't fly. Okay, then we've got, we talked about government spying, anti-corruption initiatives. So here in New York State, we've got a nice law. If you open an LLC, you got to publish it in a newspaper. Yeah, you have to find a local newspaper and publish it. Wait, no, can't be any local newspaper. It's got to be the one that the government selected for you. And you know how much it costs? Well, last I checked, $700. Oh, did I mention one newspaper? No, you have to publish in 2 newspapers. It's around $1,500, $1,400, give or take, to open. This is for an entrepreneur who's opening a company, an LLC. Really, the publication requirement made sense maybe 50 years ago because people should know that you opened the company, right? But does it make sense in the age of the internet, in the age where you could just publish online, for 1 cent? The company's been opened? Obviously not. But of course, the newspaper lobby, has friends in the New York State legislature, and so this thing never gets killed, right? That's an example. You can have larger examples. Why is Wall Street running so much? Well, we have a financial center there. Okay, very good. And then what about the people tasked with overseeing Wall Street? There's a Matt Taibbi article from Rolling Stone magazine several years back. Why isn't Wall Street in jail? This was after the whole 2008 thing where, if you remember, they played a game of hot potato. Like, who can pretend that these worthless piles of debt are worth a lot more? These junk loans, who can we just hand it off to next, right? Now, some people say that was because the Glass-Steagall Act was repealed and, certain parts of banks could act sort of in a speculative manner. At the end of the day, it's regulatory capture. It's Wall Street. Regulators were, quote unquote, asleep at the wheel, but it was a revolving door, right? It was that the same people that worked for the Wall Street firms later went to head the agencies that oversaw them, and vice versa. The heads of the agencies went to work, and not just the heads, but also the people that worked for them. Look at Medicare Part D. Go on Wikipedia. Look how it was passed. Look how many people and congressional aides went to work for the pharma industry after they themselves wrote the Medicare Part D legislation themselves. This was under Bush, okay? And then Democrats are blamed for these kinds of things, but Republicans do the same thing, and sometimes much worse. Email scandal. Look at the Bush's email scandal with Republican National Committee. 20 million emails, not 30,000, 20 million. Anyway, nobody cares, right? Benghazi, 4 people died. Very, very sad. 4 people died. This is our country, and our embassy was attacked. First time, maybe, that our embassy was attacked. Yes. Guess what? Here in my city, 3,000 Americans died, okay, in 9/11. 3,000 Americans died. So I kind of take the 4 people and the negligence that you could say Hillary Clinton had and be like, yeah, where were you when there was like bin Laden determined to attack in the United States for 9 months? Nothing was investigated or done. It was sort of like, well, okay, Clinton was on that, didn't kill him, so we're just going to like let it happen. Like negligence, yeah, but don't be a hypocrite. Like then where were you in 2001, right? Were you saying we got to support our government? If you're not supporting the war in Iraq, you're a traitor. Well, if you were that person, then what right do you have to talk about Benghazi, 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 and not even know some people what country Benghazi is in, right? It's been so politicized. My whole point is people on the left and the right, this whole other video, are being torn apart in this country. And you got to change the ballot. If you change the ballot, you can vote for more than one person. You can change a lot. Okay, next. They're against, many progressives are against legal personhood for corporations. They're against the legal shield. And so are libertarians. Libertarians for an obvious reason, because they believe that there are no corporations, there are no governments. Many libertarians believe this. Not every libertarian. And so they're just fictions, legal fictions. And so we should do away with those, and individuals should be responsible. If the company pollutes, if the company defrauds investors or whatever, then the individual should be responsible. Libertarians, I would say over half, are clear on that. Progressives, many of them also don't like corporate personhood because they don't like corporations. But for progressives, it's more like sort of identity politics. It's like corporations and the 1%, they're bad. And for libertarians will agree that they're bad and they're in bed with the government. And I just told you about the regulatory capture, whether it was Farmer and George Bush, whether it's Wall Street and I guess the Obama government. No one was prosecuted. In fact, many people just went through the revolving doors. You can see that all over the place. See, and local governments, right? But with progressives, it's sort of like, look, the evil corporations. They're not paying taxes. Okay, Bernie would have made the taxes stay in the country, right? But wouldn't it be nice if you got along with the libertarians, and then it would help you, because they would see how Bernie Sanders might help with their ideas, rather than saying, look, both parties are exactly as bad and everything like that. That's up to you. Okay. So I personally think that limited liability is a good thing. I think there are people, there could be legal entities that can declare bankruptcy, and everyone should know there's a risk to invest in them. But legal entities, I think, do actually have sort of an account, like a user account in the country. Banks can actually own a house. Your bank account is actually in somewhere in a computer that the bank owns, a computer network. Who owns that? An individual director, and then he quits, and then what? The whole bank falls apart? No, obviously there's an organization which survives any one member. And that organization needs to have its own sort of, identity and reputation and credit and be represented in court. So I disagree with this particular thing, but I'm just saying many libertarians are anti-corporate, many liberals and progressives are anti-corporate. I think liberals and progressives, they're more anti the fact that these corporations pay no tax. Many of them pay zero tax, and they just go around with Ireland and Bermuda. And you could see the GDP of some of these countries, like Cayman Islands, exceeds the growth of the U.S. There's like these tax havens, there's the U.S. GDP growth last 20 years, and then there's like the rest of the world, right? Except China's also off the charts. But like the rest of the world, U.S., and who's doing better than us? The tax havens. Like that ought to tell you something, right? So I am in favor of keeping the dollars in the country. I'm actually in favor of local currencies like Bristol pounds that you can invest in the local community. Like, let's have Detroit bucks, right? Oakland is opening its own bank. Like, why should Wall Street finance Oakland's businesses when Oakland can actually have its own bank that is in touch with people? When Bill Clinton ran for president, he said, in the debates, I remember watching it on YouTube 10 years after it actually happened. He was like, when a factory closes, I know the owners. When a business closes, I know them, because he was a governor of a small state, Arkansas. Well, if you're a mayor, you're even more in touch, right? And if you're a neighborhood, watch or whatever you call it, community, then you have a little government, and it's even more in touch with people. Like, I would like to see more decentralization. Communities have its own currency that is worthless outside the community. And then you come in, you can spend your dollars, or you can get some Detroit bucks and support Detroit. Okay, that's another video. Decentralization, how it helps. Ron Paul, obviously against corporate personhood. If you pollute, you're personally responsible. You're dragged into court, and if found guilty, you, my friend, but possibly my enemy with pollution, you must pay. I don't think that's the best way, but what can I say? Abolition of patents. So you've got sort of some libertarians like the Ayn Rand objectivists that are like, no, the product of man's mind is like the biggest property that he could possibly have. It's like you have an idea. Whoa, I want a toothbrush that like brushes your teeth when you're sleeping, and when you wake up, it's like brushed. Okay, boom. Now anyone that ever actually does it in a similar way, the doctrine of equivalence in America, like that's it. I'm going to go after them and like take them for all they're worth. Okay, but most libertarians are like, who enforces patents? The government. And they like to say the government. There are many governments, but so we got the patents and all these governments and these patent compacts between them, right? And so they're like, well, we don't want the government, we don't want patents. So that would mean possibly that if something is invented in the United States, other countries could just use it and build on it. Like with science. When Einstein built on the theories of Isaac Newton and didn't pay him a royalty. because he was long dead. So patents initially were conceived to to promote the progress of the useful arts and science. To the extent they do that, that is their purpose. In software, things move so quickly that open source, where you build on each other's thing, progresses more quickly. Linux, Wikipedia, Firefox, the browser like Chrome, Safari are based on open source technology. And so are a lot of other things. And guess what? They have a long tail. Linux works on toasters. Linux works on... This thing is running Linux right now. So, my point is, does Microsoft Windows run on everything? No. Because capitalism obviously leads to people wanting to extract a profit, organizations wanting to extract a profit. That's fine. But then they use the government to sort of knock everybody over the head, says, you can't disassemble Windows and figure things out. And fine, whatever. You have two competing ecosystems. One is the capitalist-based one with the companies competing. One is the open source one, the gift economy, with organizations collaborating and cooperating. And you can see Wikipedia kind of beat Encyclopedia Britannica. And you can see Chrome kind of beat Microsoft Internet Explorer. And so forth. And it runs on more platforms and whatever. And Linux runs everywhere. If you want to see diseases cured, like malaria and other diseases that are the long tail, because the people, there may be a lot of them, but they don't have a lot of money. If you want to see those diseases cured, maybe counteract the patent system with like a patent left, like a copy left. It's like if you use our patent, you have to open your patents, etc., etc. It could be like open source drugs. That would be nice. Fine, keep the patents, but have open source drugs. If you ever do that, then the number one objection to single payer in this country, which is, oh, but we get so much for the money. We got higher prices, but we have innovation, we have this. Like, it'll go away. Because innovation can come from any country in the world when you relax the whole patent system, if it's, like, open sourced, okay? And then others can build on it and cure malaria. And also, guess what? If other countries have more beds per patient, and you have, like, less beds, but they're super-duper beds, I'd rather be in the country, if you're the patient, you'd rather be in the country with the more beds. Because if there's a shortage of beds, who cares that your beds are better, okay? And countries with single payer, many of them do have more beds per patient, more doctors per patient. And frankly, that argument that like our doctors are better, our beds are better, that's, as far as it goes, it may be somewhat of an argument, but it doesn't defeat the fact that everyone has access in those countries to single payer healthcare. Okay, finally, let's talk about stuff like the North Dakota pipeline. Local communities. Who is it that makes the pipeline go through the Indian, Native American, I should say, territory? Who is the one doing it? Is it the local Native American tribe that's allowing this? Well, mostly it's the federal government, right? It's the federal government contracting with like a few people in there. If local communities could represent themselves, have strong property rights too, individuals and local communities would be strengthened, the protections would be strengthened, then I think they would simply be more resilient and survive things like this. They could keep their ancient land, they could keep their ancient custom, and all of you that care about indigenous people keeping what they have and not disrupting them, like you should be fighting for more protections for them, more protections for individuals. Both progressives and libertarians should care about protections for the individual and not sacrifice it for a large government federal organization that's looking out for possibly, I don't know, oil interests or whoever else, which I agree, get a lot of money by selling their oil, right? But we could also get a lot of money from solar energy, like with California right now producing so much, it's actually paying other states to take its energy because, you know, the way it works without batteries, you use it or lose it. But it's producing so much. And oil companies in Texas actually are complaining because there's too much wind and too much sun in Texas that actually wind and solar are just taking off. Literally, why is government subsidizing fossil fuels? Why is Donald Trump talking about coal plants when that China can build more coal plants and the United States can't? These countries aren't trying to build coal plants anymore. China is actually cracking down on coal plants. Even India is cracking down on coal plants, okay? Because there's so many other forms of energy that you could extract now. There's geothermal energy, nuclear energy, solar energy, wind energy, water energy. There is so much you can do. And none of these also contribute much to the greenhouse gas problem, which you have with fossil fuels. So I don't know why conservatives think that clean energy is anti-business, when the very businesses themselves just signed a letter to Donald Trump asking him to stay in the Paris Climate Accords, when several states are joining together in a compact to commit to the Paris Climate Accords. I don't know. But we as species, as humans, should care kind of about the survival of our species. And we do have to band together. So while I may not be a anarchist, the kind of either social anarchist or anarcho-capitalist or anarcho-socialist, I am a person that believes individuals and communities should be strengthened. So I'm sort of in between. I could see both sides. I could see where they're coming from. There's a lot of goodwill and good intentions on all sides. Radio hosts, TV hosts, if you watched this long diatribe of mine, then realize you have the power to kind of meet each other on your shows. And instead of just debating and then leaving your show being like, oh, that guy, he's such a deluded bitch, you know? No, how about you actually bring the person on the show, find a lot of points of agreement during your debate, all right? And then you can highlight differences, but emphasize the fact that you should work together. Last point, I would have loved to see a Bernie Sanders versus Donald Trump debate. I really would. Both men, you know, similar age, crazy hair, both tell it like it is. You know, even though for Donald Trump, like it is kind of changed over the years, but they both speak truth to power, right? And I think, personally, and they got big crowds, and they got a lot of supporters, even though the others think they're dangerous, like the right thinks Bernie Sanders is terrible, and the left thinks Donald Trump's terrible. Here's the thing. If they ever debated, the debate would go 50% of the time, they would agree. It would go like this. Bernie's like, and furthermore, I don't think the government should make money off of student loans. I think that's obscene. And Donald Trump would be like, yeah, I kind of agree with that. I don't understand why the government is in the student loans business. It's just a bad business. Anyway, I can't do the accents. But you guys can, and it's up to you to lead your fellow followers, okay? You are the leaders of your little governments, or whatever, societies, communities. You're the leaders of your communities. Please do what leaders do and stop just going for the ratings. You know, you could get really big ratings of not just debating, but actually finding points of agreement. I'm going to start debating you guys by just taking your clips, you know, fair use, short segments, and just and providing critique on them. And right now it's going to be Cenk Uygur and versus Ben Shapiro. I'd like to see that debate, but it would be nice if they found points of agreement. So much of our today's society is just focused on like how much I can just destroy you and show that you're a complete idiot, when you guys actually agree on like more than 50% of things, you know? Today's conservatives are actually liberals. Classical liberals and conservatives, guess what? Also have a lot in common. And that's for another video. This is for classical liberals and progressives. But like, yeah, classical progressives, like today's conservatives actually share your ideas. Like women can wear bikinis on the beach, okay? This was not the case always. People can actually legally cohabitate before marriage. Many states had laws against that. Anti-sodomy laws, like I'm pretty sure that most conservatives are for individual rights these days, right? Also, what about desegregation? I think conservatives pretty much got on the right side of history with that. Pretty much, mixed race marriages, women's right to go to college. How many colleges, how many conservatives you find today go like, oh, women, there should be less women in college, and women shouldn't earn as much as men. Not many actually say that. What they do say is people should be paid on their individual merits, right? You shouldn't have class warfare. And the reason I can understand conservatives too is because there's so many elements of classical liberalism in our society. It literally, our society, classical liberalism has won. People have rights. People have more or less equality of opportunity. Okay? It's just that progressives are all about further class struggle and solving the systemic issues that they see. And the conservatives are now sort of against whatever it is that the progressives are proposing. And plus, they are, for whatever reason, for removing regulations and climate regulations and so forth, thinking that that will hurt business. So you guys are arguing about bullshit when, like, the future of humanity may be at stake, okay, when it comes to overfishing and the disappearance of species, and butterflies and bees or whatever. And I'm just rambling right now, so I'm just going to go. Thanks.